Hello friends, today our lesson is going after you found the area of a window, for example, and it is 56, you can't just write the number 56 down. You have to include the units. You have to say 56 inches squared, 56 centimeters squared, 56 feet squared, whatever it is. The units are very important. Now let's really zoom into area. So what is area anyways? Well, area is the space inside a two-dimensional shape. And our formula is area equals length times width. It's that simple. So when given a real world problem, if you look at this picture and they're asking for us to look for the area, they're actually asking us to find this space inside the grass right here in square units, and that is how we measure area. We're looking at the dimensions that we're talking about in perimeter. We're looking at one-dimensional. For area, it's actually two-dimensional. So for area, it's actually a shape like rectangle and square. But for perimeter, it may be just looking for the length of a piece of yarn or a length of a stick. Okay, so what does it measure? Again, perimeter only measures the length. That's why it's 1D. And area, it's measuring the space in squared units. We're going to talk a little about that later. And in your answers, the units are very important, just like what I said at the very beginning. So for perimeter, the units in your answer will be centimeters, inches, or meters, and etc. There's a lot more than this. So for example, once you found that the length of one side of your yard is 100 meters, you have to say 100 meters. You can no longer say 100. Okay? Now for area though, your answers must have the units labeled as squared. So for example, if you were working with centimeters, it will have to be centimeters squared. If you were working with inches, it will have to be inches squared, and so on and so forth. And we have some rules how to find perimeter and area, and those are called formulas. So formula for the perimeter is pretty easy. Since we're only looking for the length, all you have to do is just add all the length of each side up. So if you have a rectangle that has 4 sides, then you need to add all 4 sides up to find the perimeter. For area, however, the formula is actually just length times width, or base times height. So let's look at some examples of how we can determine whether the question is talking about perimeter or area. So for example, if the question is asking how much grass will be needed to fill in this entire space, talking about area. However, if they're asked is the length of the edging around this garden or this grassy area, and this is what they're talking about, that's perimeter. Another example again, a perimeter question will be, what is the length of the baseboards? How much baseboard is needed to frame or to edge around this room? That is a perimeter question. Now with area though, it's going to be talking about this floor space. So how many square units will we need of tiles of wood in order to cover this entire space right here? That will be area. So for this gift wrapping example, if they were looking for how much paper we will need to completely wrap this box, then that is an area problem. But if they're asking for what is the length of the ribbon that is needed in order to wrap around this gift right here, and this is the ribbon part, as you can imagine, we can actually pull this ribbon apart and be able to measure the ribbon in one straight length like this, then that is a perimeter question. So let's go ahead and start finding the area of this given picture. We're going to start with the formula. So if you don't remember the formula, do not worry, because you are given a star reference chart and area is found under here. Since this is a rectangle, you will work with this formula right here. For a square, it's exactly the same thing. They just labeled it differently. S stands for side times side, but you can also imagine this as length times width and it'll give you the exact same answer. So again, I'm going to start with my formula, which is area equals length times width. And the second step that I'm going to do is I'm going to substitute each of these letters with these numbers. So I can imagine that this is my length and this is my width. Notice how when I wrote these numbers down, when I substituted them, I also wrote down the units. That's very important. So once I get this far, all I have to do is just multiply these two numbers together and I would have this answer right here. And my answer will not be completed until I put down the units. But notice, because I'm multiplying these units 2 times, I'm gonna put the small 2 on top of cm or centimeters right there to show that my answer is actually in squared centimeters. So here's another example that I wanted to do with you, and this is a square. Some of you may be looking at this picture and you're like, oh, but maybe they have not given me enough information. Actually, they have. Remember, one of the properties of squares is that they're the same length. So sometimes you will see these lines on a square that tells you that this length right here is the exact same measure as that length. So we can actually fill those in. Okay? So we actually do have enough information. So again, we're going to start with step 1, which is the formula. And right here, you can look at the formula for the square, or you can use the rectangle. It doesn't matter. I'm going to just continue to use the one for rectangle. Then the next step is to substitute my numbers in for my length and my width. So I can pretend this is my length and I can pretend that this is my width. And I'm going to substitute those in for my L and W. Again, when I substituted them, I also included the units because that's important for my mind to remember that, or else I will forget. So now all we have to do is just multiply the two numbers, and when we do, we will get 64. And we cannot forget the units, so it's centimeters. How many times did I multiply the centimeters? 2 times, so I'm going to put that 2 on top. And it's a small 2. So now it's your turn to try these 2 problems on your own. You can write these problems on a piece of paper and you can pause the video so you can work them out given the steps that we've shown you before. If you need to review any part of the video, you can pause and go back. So when you're checking these problems, you need to check that you started out with a formula and then you substituted the numbers for the letters and make sure your units are there. And after you multiplied and figured out your problem, make sure that this unit is also there. So these are the answers to those 2 problems. So since you've gotten really good with finding area, let's crank it up and talk about some challenging problems. So for example, like this one, they're not asking us to look for area anymore, but giving us the area. And what they're looking for is the length of this side right here. And so how are we going to do that? Well, simple. We're going to use the exact same steps as we did before. So let's start with the formula. Now that I have the formula down, I'm going to start labeling. Here's my length and here's my width. Then the next step, you guessed it, we're going to substitute these letters with these numbers that we know. So for example, for my area, I already know that number, so I'm going to put down 18 centimeters squared. Notice I also put down the units, and my length I already know, so I'm going to put down 3 centimeters. My W though, I don't know, so I'm going to leave it as a W because that's what I'm looking for. So now you can ask yourself, 3 times what gives me 18? And you guessed it, 3 times 6 will give you 18. But notice this 6 is also in centimeters. Okay, will give you 18 centimeters squared. When you have this whole thing written down, you can obviously see that 6 is actually the width, or W equals 6. Now, instead of thinking 3 times what gives you 18, you can also do the opposite of multiplication here. So since you already have the answer, you can do the opposite of multiplication. So what is multiplication? It's division. So what is 18 divided by 3? It gives you 6. This will work all the time. So it's your turn to practice these 2 problems right here, given the area. See if you can figure out what the width is in each of these problems. You can pause the video if you need to re-watch anything before, and you need to pause it now so you can copy this down and try to solve these problems on your own. So again, I do want to just go over this a little bit so that you can understand how I did it, but make sure that you're labeling every single step. Make sure that you're writing everything down, because as you're writing, it's registering these steps in your head so that you don't forget them in the long run. So I started out with the formula, area equals length times width for each of these problems. And then I substituted the numbers with the letters for area, for length, and for width. And then when I came to the very end right here, I asked myself 3 times what gives me 24? Or I can also say 24 divided by 3 will give me what? And it's 8, both ways. Okay, since the width is only the length of one side, I know that my unit is just in meters, not meters squared. And it is the same with this second problem right here. It's the same steps, so you can go ahead and double check your answers to make sure all your steps and your answers are correct. Make sure your units are also correct. So now we're going to extend this knowledge into solving real life word problems. So here's an example of how area type questions can be asked. A dining room has 2 rectangular windows. One window is 3 inches wide and 12 inches tall. The other window is 8 inches wide and 7 inches tall. What is the difference in the areas of the windows? So if you have watched my other video on how to solve word problems using the 3 reads technique, you're going to find that I always read a mathematical word problem once first, just to see and understand what it's asking. Then I'm going to go back and dissect or break this problem into one sentence at a time. And as I'm doing that, I'm also going to be drawing pictures. So I'm going to go back to each one sentence at a time. The first sentence says the dining room has 2 rectangular windows. That's very important to me. So right now I'm going to draw those 2 windows as they're talking about it. And then it's saying the one window is 3 inches wide and 12 inches tall. So I'm going to be labeling all of these dimensions that they're talking about, and all of these information are important to me, so I'm going to underline all of these. Then the question says, what is the difference in the areas? So these are 2 important things I need to know. The difference, when I hear the word difference, I'm going to think, oh, we're comparing. That means we're going to be subtracting. Whatever this is, we're going to be subtracting it. And what are we subtracting? We're actually subtracting the areas of each of these windows. So I'm going to start with this. Here's the area of this window, and here's the area of the second window. Use my formula, and I'm going to look for the answers to what the area is for this window and for the other window, and then the last step is going to be to subtract. So I want you to pause right here as you're working along with me, but I want you to try to do this independently on your own, and then come back and check your answers with mine. So I started out again with the formula, and then I substituted the letters with each of the numbers, including the units, and I found the area for each of these windows. My only problem is when I set these up, I didn't realize that the second window, that the area was bigger than the other window. And so now I have to reorganize it, put 56 inches squared on top and subtract it by 36 inches squared. And so my answer now is going to be just 20 inches squared. Okay. So that is my final answer. If you got 20 inches squared, you got it correct. Alright, so here is our last problem for this video, and this is one of the most difficult questions, and a lot of students actually missed it on a test. So I wanted to throw it in so I can explain it to you. So the problem says, Xavier wants to line his utensil drawer with some decorative liner as shown. How much liner will he need? The reason why this problem is tricky is because they didn't even tell us what they're asking for. Are they looking for a perimeter? Are they looking for volume because they gave us a 3D shape? Or are they looking for area? We don't know. It's kind of tricky. So we have to read in between the lines. So let's go ahead and read it again. So it says Xavier wants to line his utensil drawer. So as you can see, I gave you a visual, a picture of what a utensil drawer looks like with some decorative liner as shown. Decorative liner is that with the design that you see the bottom of his drawer, and it's asking how much liner will he need. Well, think about it. If he's filling this whole entire space with liner paper, that means we're actually looking for area. So that's what I'm talking about. You have to understand exactly what they're asking. And if this picture was not given to me, I would actually draw it and shade in the area, just like I did right here, to show you that it's actually talking about area. For this area, all we need are these dimensions as outline. Because I gave you a 3D real life looking drawer, it doesn't look like a rectangle prism, but it's actually a rectangle. All we need are just some dimensions right here. It's this dimension right here, and as you can see, it is 20 inches, okay? And the other dimension that we need is right here, which is 35 inches. The height of this, we don't really care about. I would actually redraw this rectangle right here. So now I have this simplified shape that I'm looking at, and all I need to find is actually the area. So I'm going to start with area again, and length times width, and then I'm going to label my length and my width again. And like I said, at this time it doesn't matter which one is the length and which one is the width, because when you multiply, it doesn't truly matter which number comes first. So the next step that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be substituting these numbers in for the letters, and then all I have to do is just solve for the problem. You can pause me so that you can solve for this on your own, and then come back and check your answers with mine. All right, and if you got an answer of 875 inches squared, you are set to go. You have mastered this skill. Make sure that your units is there, and make sure that it is the correct units. Anytime when you're answering an area question, your units have to be in squared units. Okay, so inches squared, because we multiply the inch 2 times. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for practicing with me. I hope that you guys are doing awesome as mathematicians. Have a wonderful day.